Our special coverage continues tonight out of Lewiston, Maine, where officials are telling CNN that at least 22 people have been killed at a restaurant and also a bowling alley. And a person of interest is on the loose. He's identified as the person on your screen right now. Joining me now is active shooter expert Chris-Grollnek. Chris, thank you for being here. We've been seeing these still images all night long of the person that they believe is a person of interest. They're not yet calling him a suspect. I'm watching the clothing. I'm looking at the holding of the gun. Tell me what you are gleaning from these footage you're actually seeing.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. I believe I look at this from two different vantage points. One is from the prevention standpoint of what could have been done to prevent this, and obviously from the second, from the response standpoint. And I believe a lot of your audience, which I've spoken to before on several occasions, understands that you know these incidents, when the police are coming and they're on their way, they're responding to the incident already in progress. And just like what your other guest has said, there's very little you can do once the shooting starts, and you have to take the path that will get you to the place you want to go. What does that mean? Few understand, but with technology that's available now, there's warning signs for gun detection that can say there's a gun on premise. So I'm looking at what type of cameras are in the three different locations. And while they look a little distorted, if you will, from the map point of view, they may be very relevant to where he targeted. And I would also look at the amount of training that he has. For someone to have that type of adrenaline dump into their body, say a viewer that's been in a near car crash, you can barely move, you grab your steering wheel. This person had the wherewithal and the mind to actually get back in their vehicle and then drive to another location and then another location and then for a fourth time evade. And now they're on the run. So whether that's a mental health issue or beyond, or a lot of experience, we don't know because we don't know the background, and the purpose of interest is how it's stated. I would look to see how this is going to unfold, and just pray for the best for the police, because they have a monumental task ahead of them.
Chris, I want to just go back. There was a picture that we were showing of him, and it was highlighting his face and his body as he was actually holding the weapon. I don't know if you're able to see it, but he is poised to shoot. He is looking straight ahead. His hands are in position. One is underneath the barrel of the weapon, the other on the trigger. He's looking over what appears to be some kind of maybe a scope, if I'm looking at this correctly. He's looking ahead at potential targets. What does that tell you?
It tells me he knows how to handle the firearm. I believe Director McCabe said that the type of weapon, we believe it to be an AR-15, and that is some kind of optic. I don't think it's a scope. I think it's a red dot optic.
Okay. And what does that mean, by the way, for people who don't know about guns, about that? What does that mean, an optic versus a scope?
Sure. So we're used to a scope magnifying the picture that we're looking at before we shoot, and a lot of people would consider that on hunting rifles where you have a scope. A red dot or some type of optic is called a faster pickup for your eye. So where you pick the weapon up and you see the dot is going to be on the place where the muzzle is going to be aimed. And for targets and competition shooting, they use it quite a bit. So that type of optic, if you will, it may not magnify the picture. In other words, the viewer won't be able to see it with a magnification, but the dot could magnify the background to actually help you find another target. It's called target discrimination. So, terrible situation to talk about target discrimination when there's so many victims and so many people shot. And I would just go back to his handling of the weapon shows some type of occupational proficiency. Most people, especially people without training, stand still. Their posture's not correct. They don't know how to hold the weapon. When it fires, they lean back. The pictures that I've seen show him leaning into it, moving as he's walking on a tightrope, and being very deliberate in his steps and his actions to include his hand movement, which is functional for the weapon.
And I'm looking, of course, and in the photo that we're seeing, he's at a bowling alley. We've heard from eyewitnesses they saw children running out of this bowling alley. It could have potentially had many children inside. This is not going to a gun range. This is not going to a place where perhaps he would believe he could encounter people who could respond. These are essentially soft targets. What do you make of that?
Well, tragically, I've studied these things since 2007. I was in an active shooter in 2010, and I wrote my master's thesis on the phenomena of active shooters. And tragically, a lot of these people, they don't wake up one day and become an active shooter. You know, I heard the background, and I won't elaborate on what his mental health state is. But I will tell you, the FBI tells us that less than 25% of active shooters have a mental health diagnosis. The key word there is diagnosis, because most don't get help. So the people that call for gun control, I think, you know, I can agree and I can understand where they're coming from. The people that call for mental health work, I can agree, I understand where they're coming from. But I think there has to be the third tier of the realism. There's over 400 million firearms in the United States. Less than 550 have been involved in active shooters. That is 550 too many, and I would not disagree at all. But with the condition and the problem that we have right now, we continue to come back to the same debates, whether it's the training, the firearms, the laws, the mental health, and the behavior. This person had a vision of what they wanted to do, whether it was a copycat, whether this is why we don't say their names traditionally, because we're not trying to glorify them, and we don't want to put them on a plateau where somebody wants to outdo them or they want to outdo someone else. And I am sure when this manifesto comes out, we're going to know this has been planned, orchestrated, and in their mind, it made sense. So I'm of the opinion all active shooters have some type of mental health diagnosis, because what we would agree on, I believe, is no sane person would go to a bowling alley where there's children and fire. So he was somehow either connected to the location or knew the location. And if the reporting is accurate that he was possibly laid off from a location near there, maybe he was targeting people from the work, you know, where it's a workplace spillover. And I want to be very careful, because I don't want to mistake semantics for a victim that they don't care what you call it. Their loved one is dead. And I think we have to be very careful. And I would applaud the last guest that was speaking about the reunification programs.
Yes.
Those are the hardest things. They're the hardest things to look at, to do, to plan. And from what all the guests have said on scene, it's going very well. I applaud that. And I think everybody's doing an outstanding job. The reporting has been spot on. And I just want to say also, I wish it wasn't. I wish it was poor reporting. I wish we didn't know the questions to ask. I wish there weren't guests that knew what they were talking about, because my whole mission in life now, you know, I've retired and I've come back. I started the Active Shooter Prevention Project, and that's not a plug. Please don't call me. I don't capitalize on these things. What I'm saying is we can prevent them. Okay, we know what happens after these things happen, from 0 to 8 minutes, and then they're over. The police cannot get there until 8 minutes. So why shouldn't we shore up that first 8 minutes? And I believe technology is the way to do that. I'm not selling anything. I'm just telling you there's a way to prevent them. We just have to get creative and do it.
Chris, thank you so much. I'm going to keep thinking about that optic you're talking about, and the red dots and the posture of the person who's of interest, his feet seeming to be walking as if he's continuing along on what he is doing with that gun. Really important to hear your perspective. Thank you so much. And everyone out there, there are more than 50 people who are also hurt.